Hi everybody, we're right here in El Paso, Texas, greatest community in the entire country, and we're here to talk again about healthcare. This is the issue of the day, and what better place to talk about it than right here in El Paso with a great guest. Priscilla Viescas Sanchez is a third generation El Paso businesswoman, and she is in the business of making beautiful boots. You can see right here the product from her company. Priscilla, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm honored to be here.
We're going to talk today about your life experience and your business and how it works with healthcare and some of the choices that you've had to make. But let's talk first about you. Tell us about where you grew up, your life here in El Paso, and a little bit about your business.
Yeah, I was raised here in El Paso. I went to Eastwood High School, and as you mentioned, I'm third generation entrepreneur. My grandfather had a tortilla factory and my father helped when he grew up. He helped him run it into a pretty good business. It's Mexi Snacks. And my mom had her business as well.
What kind of business did she have?
Well, my mom and I actually had a business together. She worked with my father in the Mexican foods business as well. And then she and I had another business where we set up credit card systems and a check recovery system. And my husband and I own Champion Attitude Boots, which is Kaboots. And that's from his family. He's actually fourth generation entrepreneur as well. So
right here in El Paso?
Right here in El Paso.
And all
I went
in
to
boots?
Eastwood. Well, all in boots. They all started in fact, Joey's great-grandfather started working side by side with Tony Lama.
Wow.
And they passed the talent and the information on down generation to generation. And each generation has actually always had their own separate business, but the talent and the tradition has been passed on. So when I met my husband, it was kind of an exciting craft and art, so it was interesting to get into.
You know, these boots are almost like a piece of art, and I want you to show off a little bit of the
These are kind of boring,
the handicraft of Kaboots and the company that you guys have founded and run.
Yeah.
But running a business is not easy. I've got two that I'm involved in, not only my law office, but a little real estate that we have to operate to keep my law office in and other things. So the idea of taking money in, paying checks for employees and making sure you got the best employees, covering the overhead, whether it's rent or paying for the building, making sure that the taxes are paid on time quarterly, getting the laws and understanding all the laws that you got to do on human resources and stuff. So running a business is tough, and I want folks to kind of know out there, when you're looking at where the new employment's going to come from, it's not going to be in big business. In fact, big business is cost-cutting and lowering their profile of employees, laying people off. In this community, the engine of growth are the 18,000 small businesses like your own that get an order in from Germany for some great new boots and have to meet that order. And so making those decisions every day is really the growth of El Paso. How are we going to add more jobs here in El Paso? So I want to talk about those choices that you make to keep your most valued employees, to make sure that they enjoy coming to work every day and that you can produce wonderful boots.
Yeah, we're lucky that way because the type of business that we have is a craft, so and a tradition. So in El Paso, we have the talent to tap into in that way. It's getting harder though because the craft is diminishing just a little bit. But it is hard because there's the aspect of the business and the building of the boots and building of the product, but then as you mentioned, there also is the whole taking care of your employees and taxes and managing the business end of the business, and not just building the product. And it's very difficult because we don't have a large staff, so it takes a lot of time away from the product in order to educate yourself on the options and the laws and the difficulties of finding what you can afford out there for whether it's your supplies or health insurance or health care for your employees, being able to offer benefits to your employees when they deserve it, but being able to balance, of course, your pricing structure, your product, your supply lines, along with the other services out there. It gets difficult.
Well, let's talk about health care. and in your business, health care for you and your family, and then health care for your employees, and the difficult choices that you've had to make, because I think more and more those choices are in every business, and they're having to work with their employees and others to try and make it balance. In the state budget, we're not far away from the point where health care costs are not going to be sustainable. We can't pay them. They're too high. And that's for a lot of reasons. The cost of pharmaceuticals, stay in the hospital, these rising costs associated with obesity. That's an issue that's being transferred into every single health care bill that we've got. But in your business, how does it work when you make the choice, what can I do, what can I afford, and how are we going to do health care?
It is very difficult. We actually have to shop around at least every 2 years. Because of the rising costs, you know, I think it's somewhere along the lines of at least 10% a year. We can start off with what we feel is a decent plan, but it has to have a huge deductible in order for us to be able to afford it.
What is your deductible now?
$5,000. It's a $5,000 deductible, and that is just to cover. Actually, there's just 4 of us that are covered, and the reason being that we could not afford to cover 100% for our employees. In order to qualify for a group plan, you have to have a certain percentage of participation. Well, being that we couldn't afford 100% coverage for our employees, we didn't get the enrollment that we were hoping to get so that we could qualify, because they felt that my employees felt that they themselves could not afford the portion that they were required to participate in. So it got to the point to where we're not even using a group plan because of the number of employees we have, and we're small, but the number
How many employees do you have?
Well, actually, we just had to have some layoffs with the economy. It's gotten tough, but I've got an office staff of 4, and I've got about 5 bootmakers, and then I've got what we've done is gone to individual contractual labor so that we could kind of balance that rather than have in-house employees. So we've had to accommodate that way. But we had to make the choice rather than go to a group plan because we couldn't for individual plans. So, of course, individual plans are much more expensive, and you have to look at higher deductibles. You really use it more as a safety net in the case of catastrophic illness, because you really don't get to use it on a day-to-day basis.
Wow.
So.
And tell me about this. You've got a sister who does have health insurance and had a very significant health issue, not just for her, but also looking out after her son or daughter. Tell us about that.
Yeah, she passed away June 30th.
I'm very sorry about that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it was actually tragic. She had been ill for quite some time, from the time she was 15. She was 2 years older than I am. And from the time she was 15, she had lupus, so she had this pre-existing condition. She was lucky in that she went to the school district. She became a teacher, put herself through college, became a school teacher, so she was able to get covered, and she had good health insurance. Well,
if
by
she
our
were
standards.
Working for your company,
well, no,
with pre-existing condition,
impossible.
could she have ever gotten
Absolutely
covered?
Not, no.
Share with the audience, what is a pre-existing condition, and how do insurance companies look at that?
Well, her condition was lupus. She was diagnosed at the age of 15, so that is a lifelong autoimmune system disease, so that's not something that she would have ever gotten over. It was something that she's going to carry, carried throughout her life. So when looking for insurance companies, of course you have your questionnaire that you take for any kind of health issues you have, and of course her condition would be a pre-existing condition because it's something that was chronic that she would never get over. So of course they look at that before determining whether you can be covered, if there's going to be any kind of a lapse before you're covered, if you have to enroll and pay premiums for perhaps 2 years before they decide to cover you, and at what percentages they're going to cover you, what you can qualify for, which is usually very, very minimal in the event that you have a pre-existing condition, if not impossible.
So she had a pre-existing condition, but by going to work for the government, frankly, a school district, she could get into a very large pool of covered employees, got covered, and then what happened?
Well, for several years it was fine, but as her condition deteriorated, she got worse. She wound up getting cancer, and then actually there at the very end she had contracted swine flu, and she passed away due to the complications with her lungs with the swine flu. the times that she was in the hospital, the things that she encountered that became difficult for her, you know, teachers' salaries and being a single mom, the district provides, but when you are inundated with out-of-pocket expenses, because she still had out-of-pocket expenses, she was not covered 100% either. Well, you know, I imagine certain medicines, they might be qualify for maybe generics, but not the new, you know, name brand product out there, so there might be differences there. Or if she wanted to go to a certain doctor that was not necessarily covered, then of course she would have to. And in El Paso, you've got fewer resources. Sometimes when you require specialties, you have fewer resources, and you have, you know, one doctor that might, for instance, she would have wounds, and there was a wound care doctor here that was fabulous, but was not on her plan. When they changed, it was on her plan at one point, but then they had to change plans with the district, and then he no longer was on her plan. So
she couldn't go to him anymore.
Couldn't go to him anymore. And one of the this was one of the issues at one point, was not aware or made aware that he was no longer on the plan early on enough. So then, of course, those bills now, you know, once were covered and then no longer became covered. You know, and there was an issue with the hospital where the doctor had. She was in the hospital and the doctor had required her to stay. I don't remember how many days, perhaps 3 or 4 days, but the insurance company, when it went to underwriting, then denied, saying that it was not medically necessary. So she found herself sometimes not, you know.
Wait. Go through that again. So a doctor is suggesting and saying.
Prescribing, yeah.
In my opinion, as a doctor, now I've been through 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, I've got a specialty in this issue. I see these patients every day. I know what I'm doing. This patient needs to get this care. So the doctor has prescribed a certain protocol to go in and do. And after she's been enrolled in it and done it and received services, the insurance company's saying it's not medically necessary. They're second guessing what the doctor's saying and saying we're not going to pay for it.
Right, and that was at the tune of $28,000.
What they wouldn't pay for.
What they wouldn't pay for, $28,000. So that was one stay.
And so who has to negotiate that $28,000? You get a $28,000 bill, and in every home in El Paso that I know, they're going to go, oh my Lord, how are we going to do with this? So you get a $28,000 bill.
In this community, that's a year's salary.
And you thought you were covered by health insurance. These are people that have health insurance.
Right.
So she's holding on to a $28,000 bill. What does she do?
Right. Well, I mean, at this point, she had fought it. At this point now, her 19-year-old son is having to deal with it.
Why is he having to deal with it?
Well, because she passed away in June, and the indebtedness is still there. I mean, it basically now it will be held against her estate. So if he wants to claim his inheritance, what he has to do is deal with the creditors that are basically still want to get paid for their services.
So, for example, the house, does she own a house?
Yes.
And for him to stay living in the house, he has to negotiate with the hospital because the insurance company wouldn't pay him.
Correct.
That's what's happening?
That's what's happening.
I wish more people in El Paso knew
these
sad. Stories,
I mean,
because what I think is that not enough of these stories are being told. And the folks that have health insurance, well, they say, well, I'm covered.
Right.
It's going to help me. Yeah. And so they don't worry about it. And the folks
probably the healthy people.
Probably the healthy people will not worry
people.
about it.
Right.
But those that encounter the system and get into this denial by insurance companies, and a stack of bills starts rising, and then they have to use their time. Well, and if it's a chronic condition, if it is a chronic condition, I mean, if perhaps if it happens once or twice, it was an accident and you wind up in the hospital, sure, you think, oh gosh, it's never going to happen again. You make monthly payments, you get it paid down, you don't worry about it. But when you live with a chronic condition like lupus or like diabetes.
What's
another chronic condition that a lot of folks have here in El Paso?
Well,
heart disease is one of them.
Heart disease can be. I mean, if you've got high blood pressure and it's something that you have to manage, absolutely. You know, if it's something like MS, if it's, you know, something that is chronic and progresses, you know, that it becomes more and more debilitating as you get older, of course, as we age anyway. But then when you've got these chronic illnesses, it's even worse. So you deal with these medical issues on a daily, weekly, you know, monthly, yearly basis for your entire life.
And your time's not compensated. It's coming out of the Saturday morning when you're wrestling through the bills and trying to talk to somebody about help. So your 19-year-old nephew is coming to you to say, well, what do I do? How do I get through this?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. The President of the United States, and I'm gonna reveal my bias. I love what he's doing. That he's taking on these big issues.
I do too.
For so long in this country, these big issues are just left, and no one's taking the challenge. No one's accepting the responsibility to make America better and to make things work well. That's really the role of government, in my opinion.
Right.
Government is us all doing what we can't do alone. That's why we have public schools. We can't all have a little public school in our home. And so we established public schools. This was years ago under a great President Jefferson. So in healthcare, the president's laid out 4 broad goals. And the first one is, in our great country, in this year, we should have healthcare access for everyone in the country. When I hear that goal, you know, you go to Britain or you go to Canada, you go to France, Japan, all the countries of the world that are industrialized democracies, they've had it for 50 or 60 years. What do you think about that first goal, that everyone ought to have health care? And it's really a moral debate that we're in now.
Yeah. I agree with you. We do business worldwide. I've got lots of customers in Canada, in Europe, in England, and this kind of notion that has been put out there that it doesn't work out there is, in my dealing with people who live in those countries, is absolutely false. They love their system, and I'm lucky in that I get to talk to people all over the world on a daily basis, and because of the business that we're in, it's a very friendly, we talk and we'll ask questions, and they ask us questions. And I had some clients in from Canada that were talking about this issue before, actually, before where we are now, months ago, and they had said, you know, oh, you know, Canada's healthcare isn't all that great, you know, we have to wait, you know, a couple of weeks for an appointment. And I thought, well, that's not different than we are here. And they flat out asked me, well, how long does it take you to get an appointment? Or, you know, they started asking me, when I told them about my premiums that we were paying, you know, anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a month, depending on where depending on where we are in our couple of years. They looked at me and said, "Oh, forget it. We'll keep our health care." So the issues that
how long does it take you to get an appointment, say, and some of the things that you need to deal with?
Well, for you, them in Canada or here?
Well, in Canada, first of all, what were they talking about? A couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean,
and
a couple of weeks,
here,
at the most, maybe 4 weeks. But you know, I just made an appointment for my son for his dentist, and I had to wait 6 weeks for an appointment. I don't see, you know, the difference. It's, yes, there are demands out there, and we meet those demands, but that's not necessarily bad health care. That's just the population, the demands of the population, and balancing it out. But they don't have to pay $1,000. I mean, they would be even more upset if they had to pay $1,000 a month for any kind of coverage. You know, it's absurd. And you don't get to use it. That's $1,000 a month with a $5,000 deductible. Or, you know, if you want to get it down, you know, it's maybe $400 or $500 a month for a $5,000 deductible. $1,000 maybe will get you $2,000 deductible, you know, but it's still you know, it's.
Let's talk about the second issue that the president's raised, and I think it's so important, and that is costs. When you look at your business, you've got to renegotiate every 2 years, and your deductible's going up. What you have to pay for is going up. Every time you go to visit, what you have to copay is going up. What the cost of the drugs are going up. And so more and more is coming out of your pocket, and less is coming out of what is covered by the insurance companies. I don't think a lot of our viewers know that if you go into a regular, say, Blue Cross Blue Shield policy, 29 cents of every single dollar is going into administration, or what they call denial management. What's denial management? It's telling you we're not going to cover it. They're being paid with your dollar to tell you we're not going to cover it. Exactly what happened to your sister and nephew. The other part is advertising, administration, and so forth. If you go into a Medicare program, government-run program, that number's 5 cents. 5 cents runs the program. And so as we look at these rising costs and what we're going to do, I think a lot of Americans don't have to wrestle with it every year, because who's wrestling with it is the school district. Their administrators wrestling with it. Or down in Austin, we're wrestling with rising Medicare costs and having to look at overutilization and why your folks are prescribing so many tests and so forth that are not needed, which is another part of it. But the rising cost issue, from your perspective, how do you see that as a national goal?
Well, I mean, costs are, well, you know, I'm not quite sure how to respond specifically to what you just said, but what comes to mind is two things. The misconception or the conception out there that the government is somehow inadequate to manage the types of issues. You know, oh, I don't want government to handle it. But what you just said is 5 cents as opposed to 29 cents. Where's the inefficiency? Is it in the private sector or is it the government? That just goes to show that it's the private sector that seems to be wasting our money and not the government. So that was something that came to mind out of what you just said.
I think that fact is not known well.
Yeah.
But some economists are now talking about the whole issue of denial management.
Right.
Your dollar is being recycled into thwarting your health care.
Right.
And thwarting what your doctor is saying needs to be done.
Right.
And if you go listen to the testimony in Austin, what they use is this euphemism called denial management. Well, we've got to manage this file and we're going to deny you coverage. So they call it denial management. And you look at their books and you get to the bottom line, you say, wait a minute, here's $1 of health care. Right. So I'm paying you to cover me with insurance. In your case, it's $1,000 a month. Right. And you're spending almost $300 of that to tell me no, to tell me that I'm not covered, to tell me that this, what the doctor told me that I needed, I don't need, and he's the doctor and you're the insurance company, so that you can keep that money in your pocket to pay record profits up the line to some of your management. Right. That's what's really happening, and a lot of folks in America, I don't think, know the bottom line on that. I think the president's exactly right. When you go and look at the macro system, so let's compare us to Canada or us to maybe Britain. Now, these are countries that for 60 years have had health care. And you look at what we're spending for dollars and what they're getting and what we're getting. The satisfaction of the Britons, the satisfaction of those in Canada is up here with their healthcare system. In America,
really
it's here, but we're paying twice as much for half the care.
Right, yeah. No, it's absolutely crazy. The notion, again, about the inefficiency and competitiveness, if that's where we're headed, and what President Obama, in my view, and bringing the idea of a public option, I feel was really the solution to keep it competitive. For the points that you just illustrated, 5 cents with Medicare, the government program, 29 cents. That tells me that they must feel that they have a whole lot of money to be managing. So if they're not concerned about that cost, you know, as a business person, you're always concerned about how to keep that margin. You need to keep that margin, so you start looking at your expenses and how you're spending. So you know, those things you want to keep down. So in my view, as a small business person, the government is a large consumer, a large buyer of goods and services from the small business sector. So putting something like that into place would maximize efficiencies in the marketplace, because you have to be more competitive. So I see it as incongruent in that they're trying to protect the marketplace and protect the free market, but yet the free market is operating as a monopoly and not a free market. They're making choices. These large businesses seem to be making choices for small businesses by keeping us, as a small business person, out of the game. So, you know, I don't know, again, if that is directly in response to what you're talking about. I
completely agree with you that if you take out the public option, especially in states where you've got 85% of the market in one insurance company, you're not going to get the competition that will drive the choice. You can't go and say, wait a minute, let me talk about my health care.
Right.
Let's say I've got chronic condition heart. Under your program, I can do it for $250 a month, but you're $500. That choice is being made for you when your only choice is this insurance company. And I truly believe that if you don't offer that, you're not going to get the competition that makes that work.
No, you're not
Here in
going
El Paso, for example.
No, and the companies that are making profits, and you said record profits as they have been, with the prices obviously going up, they don't care the number that are participating in their programs. So as long as they are making their mark and they're reaching their goals and their profits, they don't mind if their market is shrinking, because there's always going to be a segment of the marketplace that is going to be paying what they need to get in order to maintain their profits. So there's no incentive for them to become more competitive, because they're not competing against anybody to gain more market share. If there was another option for consumers to go to move them away from those programs into this program, well, you know, obviously what they're going to have to do is drop prices and become more competitive to maintain that. But as long as they're not losing customers in that way to another option, they don't mind if they're losing, if those consumers are falling out of the marketplace altogether, because they're not going anywhere. There's no other competition, no other building of that competition. So as long as they're making their profits, as long as they're making their marks, they're going to charge what they want as long as somebody's paying it. I mean, that's the key tenet of a free marketplace. It's what the market will bear. I mean, that's basic.
We need to get you on the national talk show. You have just made the case that the president, I think, needs to make more and more.
I agree. Yeah.
The president needs to get in front of the American people and say what you just said. And you are the most articulate business woman, man that I've heard in this whole debate talk about the need for the competition and what it does to pricing.
Right.
And you can't have a choice unless you've got two choices in front of you.
Right, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but what would be even more interesting is to also illustrate how small business working with the government and bidding for those services would also kind of give the economy a boost, because as you said earlier, is the small businesses with large businesses downsizing, you're going to see more and more small businesses emerging. So
I think that's happening now.
Right, and it is, and it should, and that's fabulous. But
that's part of American innovation, ingenuity. When you break up GM and Saturn goes away and Penske won't take it, won't do anything. You've got Tesla emerging.
You
know? Now you're going to have Tesla emerging because they see a market share that GM never got into or wasn't expertise. Didn't have, so that's American innovation. We ought to support that. And so that option of having a way to cover your employees and keep your margins low on health care. Right now, American vehicles are carrying a $1,200 per vehicle health care legacy cost. So you go to Japan or France against Renault or Italy against some of their makers and say, we're going to compete with you, and they say, great, how are you going to do it? You've got $1,200 costs embedded in your car, and we're going to start the day at zero. You start at $1,200.
It is. It's symbiotic. I mean, when you really look at the overlap of the issues of what we're talking about, again, the thing that I find very annoying as a business person is these talking heads, as I call them, talking about keeping the market competitive. That's not what they're doing. That's exactly the opposite of what they're doing. It's incongruent.